pictures, but this time I'm going to be focusing on the green policies that we need to adopt, because there is a lot of talk about whether the change is something that we are going to see, or are we going to get back into the good old, bad old ways. For a moment, I said good old ways. So we need to really be aware of what it actually means and what's happening where. And I thought that would be a good thing to turn our attention to today. Let's see what it covers. Today's talk is going to be, of course, the climate impact that we are facing at the moment. We'll go into a little bit more detail about some of the specific things that we can look at to see the change that is taking place because of the lockdown in terms of the climate and the pollution compared to what it was before. So I think that's useful to be able to keep that in mind, that if there is some concerted action, it does make a difference. And we need to have confidence that the change can come about if we put our minds to it. That's what the lockdown is showing us, essentially. Then, of course, the impact on our daily lives. I mean, it's also a good idea to see how we have changed to be able to see the new world, as it were, the new pandemic world, in some ways that we have been trained in a way because of the lockdown. How our habits have sort of changed in a way. And I'll just sort of point out a few that are there. And then the main thing would be about the EU green policy. EU is not just one country, it's going to be the whole of Europe practically. And they're coming out with a fantastic sort of program which they have spelled out in a fair amount of detail as to what it needs to do to achieve the targets that it's setting out to. And I remember mentioning it to you, I think last time, Ursula von der Leyen, when she first came in, she talked about the green energy that she has her focus on. So I think it'll be worthwhile to look at in a bit more detail at that. And of course, the UK green policies, I'm not going to be talking too much about it because that is simply to basically say that we need to keep our eyes and ears open to see what's going on in our own country. And if, maybe somebody is calling me for to be let in, is it? Or something like that. Do I need to let them in? Participants, let me see. No, there isn't anybody waiting there, so that's fine. Okay, here we go. As far as today's topic is the sustainability after COVID-19. It's the public policies for inclusive green growth. I think we're all sort of for it. It's a question of how it gets delivered and how we can, in fact, influence it. That's a very important sort of question that we have, has been highlighted this pandemic now, because I don't think we'll get another opportunity like this. When the planes have stopped flying, when, everybody stopped their travel and the roads, are empty, I don't think this will ever happen again. So with that sort of change that has happened right before our eyes, we need to see what the results of that is. Is that something that is happening that I don't know about? This little clicking that's going on. 6 participants here. Okay, so here we are. The climate. What we're going to very quickly cover is the impact of cities, the pollution. These are real-life pictures I'm going to be showing you of from satellites and so on. So we'll have a look at that. Yeah. Now this is this thing. The kind of profound shutdown has meant that hardly any traffic anywhere, and that you can already start to see that there's less of a sort of fog around these places of pollution, and that's a picture that I thought was showing. And these are all the factories and industry which is at a standstill as well. So it's bit like nighttime picture, but during the day. Now, I thought this was interesting because here is New York making a pretty big, statement here that high pollution levels, and this is a picture taken in 2019 by satellite, I think, by infrared or whatever. They use cameras off. And the thing has changed in the next picture we see by a tremendous amount of, by an order of 30%. So it is quite a substantive change. And here it's New York 1 year later. You can see there's hardly any red there. So it means that 30% change is just due to transport and to economic activity, in fact, because the houses are still going to be using whatever energy they're going to be using. But how it gets delivered to the houses remains a bit constant. Whereas we are driving less, flying less, and that sort of itself has such an impact, which I think is quite noticeable and noteworthy as well. And this is China. In China, again, this is a picture of the earlier on, and pre-January, I think, pretty, which is satellite pictures, a huge amount of industrial activity in this part here, causing pollution. And then the reduction of 10 to 30% in Northeast China as well. You can see the picture next one. Here we are. Hardly any red spots there. Maybe in Seoul a bit here. But China has really sort of slowed down in terms of the pollutions that get created, the emissions. And then you have in Italy as well a picture we can see. This is Italy. Again, pre-pandemic as it were, a huge amount of industrial activity up in North Italy. There's Italy there. The northern part, Milano and all that here. So it's a very clear indication to us that there is such an humongous amount of activity that gets to sort of create the climate problem that we have. In fact, here it is, the next picture after the lockdown, big reduction. Okay, there's another one saying the same thing. This is again of, I don't know why this clicking is coming along. I hope somebody is not trying to get in. I don't know how to let them in because I can't see them at all. All of you out there, you didn't have any difficulty getting in. I imagine that anybody wants to get in, be able to do so as well. Okay, here it is 19 picture, 2019 and 2020. Again, humongous amount of change. And now it's a question of seeing whether we can maintain with green energy this type of level, as it were. Let me just...
It's a kind of scraping noise. Is everyone getting it?
Yeah. Maybe it's because we're using the U3A one.
Oh.
I don't know. Maybe.
Is it because there's a clicking noise?
Yeah, it's not too distracting, though.
No, it's not very loud.
It's not too disturbing.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, okay.
It's fine.
So anyway, this is where we want to head towards in the post-pandemic world, but then at the same time have the economic activity. Yes, Doug? Did you say something?
No, sorry, no, I was just resting my arm in odd position. Sorry.
All right, not to worry. Right, here we go. Okay, cleaner air. lockdown, this is what we have found to be in our interest. Yeah, clean cities, no traffic, you can actually see, miles away with some sort of clarity. So wonderful sort of to be able to know that that can happen. And what we want to go for is this clean energy, which will be, of course, we've been talking about it. But then there's also talk about the fact that these farms, they seem to somehow, I think the government is not pushing it too sort of too much. So there's not much news about it as to what's happening in UK, but elsewhere, a lot of action is going to be undertaken. And we'll see that in the EU policy. This is the consequences of not taking any action. It's so clear, apart from the jobs, which we can't forget, which is going to be, something that every household is going to be impacted. But the fact that the environment is going to be changing to this extent that you have desolation, as it were. So we need to protect it. You remember in one of the earlier lectures that I had given, we talked about the ozone layer. And remember the ozone layer, that was a big, big talk in the 80s and 90s, which was in fact enveloping the earth and stopping, and a big hole was being created in the south and north poles, which was letting in a lot of very damaging ultraviolet rays from the sun, which could be damaging to life on Earth. So, and those were caused, that ozone layer was being decimated by things called chlorofluorocarbons, the CFC that you might have heard of, the stuff that was used in refrigerants and so on. And then they got together in the late 80s, 90s, and made an agreement that they need to ban these types of the components in the gases in the cooling parts of the fridge and the air conditioners and so on. And now, by the year 2050, that ozone layer is going to be reinstituted. The holes are going to disappear, which is, fantastic news. And it's a result of global action. And you may also be surprised to know that, the thickness of this ozone layer, believe it or not, it's only 2 millimeters thick around the globe. And just those 2 millimeters of ozone layer, which is the oxygen layer, if you like, protects us from, becoming extinct eventually. So you can see, how delicately the whole nature of the balance is in nature. And yet, humanity managed to come together and do something about it, and we are well on the way to recovering our ozone layer back. But now we'll have to sort of deal with a much different type of thing, which is again the warming of the earth, which comes about because of the CO2 emissions and so on. And the warming is causing these type of devastation, the droughts having, and big thunderstorms and fires taking place. The frequency is increasing, which is a sure signal that something is not right and that damage is being created. So we need to come together for this. And yet, because, we don't have much for good leadership, as you remember, I mentioned it, that at least in the financial crisis of 2008, Gordon Brown took the lead, along with the USA at that time, Obama, and they fixed the problem to the best way they can, but it got the whole economy moving again. So that's, a multilateral approach and with some leadership. But right now we don't have a leadership in the climate sort of threat that we have, especially when we know that USA has pulled out and has no they are to come back and trying to pull out of any other type of, and the EPA. I mean, to put in somebody who's anti-EPA into the Environmental Protection Agency in USA is, I think, is a crime, and yet he has done it. So when you come to climate sort of issues, this government, US present government, is doing the opposite of what is required. And fortunately for USA, the states have enough power to bring about, green energies, and California is very much ahead of that. So there are states like that. So there is some little, glimmer in the clouds there. Now, another thing that, of course, has changed is the fact that you've got these airlines which have stopped flying, and therefore they're not contributing to the pollution either. So in a way, green sort of policies by default we are experiencing for a little while. But then it's a major industry with millions of people involved for jobs. So we'll have to see how that can be made into a green type of industry. That's the sort of thing that they'll have to fight against the lobbies that are there. And we talked about that, didn't we, last time? Even when we talked about Tesla, Tesla has come out with an electric sort of car, and we went into some detail on that. But then the GMs and the VWs and the BMWs and all the Fords, they're all on, fossil fuels. And their lobby, and along with the oil lobby, is a pretty mighty lobby to fight against. So the governments are going to have to develop a job to try and bring about a change, but they need to start. So we'll have to be part and parcel, as you said, we need to be part and parcel of the active participation in bringing about the right type of people in government. Yeah, this is the way to forward. We need to have the sun sort of being utilized, solar panels, so that the energy, because energy is the basis of all our economic activity. Anything that we eat or we make or use has underlying it somewhere energy, and that energy is usually provided to us by these firms utilizing either gas or coal or nuclear energy, and very little of the solar, the renewable energies, and that's where the focus needs to be. Push the policy and these energy providers to do that. On that, I heard the other week that Elon Musk, because he's a great one as a visionary for providing sustainable energy. We talked about that in our previous lectures. And he's applied for a license to provide electric energy for electricity use here in UK. So he could become a player here in UK, and I'm hoping he will become a player, because he's one of the people that I think is doing something about global issues, that find that others are not in the same league. Yeah, these are these solar panel farms, which is, I think, an excellent idea. When you've got these big sort of open areas, you just put them in with the solar panels and get electricity out of them, which seems to be a very commonsensical way to do it. But it's just that oil lobby has been so strong that it hasn't really allowed it to happen. Okay, what has the impact of this pandemic been on our lives? Lifestyle changes. Like, for instance, here, we are beginning to read to our children a lot more, I think. That's what I picked up on the internet as somebody, analyzing this was saying. And I think we are, because we are talking a bit more to our family, we're talking a bit more to our friends, and maybe interacting with our family more. Being at home with the children means that you can't escape them anyway if you have the children. So there is by default much more interaction between the young and the old. And then, of course, you know, on Thursdays we saw, I think, at least in Italy, they used to bang the drums out of their windows. Here, somebody's playing the trombone. And I remember on Thursdays we do the clapping and so on. So we are getting out together as a sort of little community doing something. I know one of you who is here, I think, attends these street parties and gets together with the local community, which is, again, you know, making a different type of environment for oneself in a lockdown, which I think is an excellent idea. Yeah, we are also sort of eating a lot of takeaways. So here we are, lots of people being, you know, delivering stuff. Maybe the fast food is not the answer, but of course we need to think about that. I think later on we do. And of course we are keeping in touch a lot more. Those who don't have Zooms and things like what we are using, and they can have the good old phone and have, you know, endless amounts of chats on that. So human interaction has really increased because of this pandemic. Although we are in lockdown, which specifically means you need to keep away from people. But then socially, I think, communication-wise at least, I think that has increased. I would imagine that is the case with most people, and with me as well, I think, because one can't just sit down and watch TV. You need to have some human interaction, and you can talk to people and you know, see and hear them. Well, say something which is meaningful rather than taking a passive entertainment from TV with no interaction. We can say, ah, yeah, I'm thinking of you, which is, I think, a good thing to hear from your friends. Brings them closer in a way. Here we are. This is what we do. This is what we are doing right now. Zooming. And I think there is a cousin of mine in Dubai just sent me a message and said, look, the whole family is going to get together at 8 o'clock Dubai time so that we can have a Zoom session. So I said, well, because the family is all over the world, you better give us the actual time, what 8 o'clock in Dubai means. Because there are about 8 or 10 cities that are involved. So that we managed to, you know, at least catch the time that we should. But it certainly has given us a good means now to take this across into the post-pandemic world, to do our communication and our business interaction as well, to a large extent, because people are talking about video conferencing. In the old days, they did talk about it, but now it's become much more common. And if you go by the number of people who are using Zoom, I think it's crossed over 100 million. And I think before long, it's going to sort of be even more. So that's a sort of being thrown at the deep end, as it were, of having to adapt to new technology. Yeah, exercises. Yeah, this being at home and not having to being able to go out means you figure out new ways of keeping yourself active. And one of the ways, of course, is maybe jumping up and down and doing a yoga, which I do. I'm sure some of you as well do. And I think it's a very good thing to get into a habit of doing. And you don't need very expensive equipment to sort of, you know, keep yourself active and do the exercises. So here again, a change, I think, which will carry forward with us in a post-pandemic world. Yeah, we're going to be flying less. Now, how long it's going to take us to get back to on the planes, I think, is a matter of individual circumstances, I suppose. There might be people who have to travel. But with this lockdown of two weeks waiting and all that, quarantine, certainly business activity is not happy about that, but we'll see how long that lasts. But in terms of individual holidays and all that, we are all very much now thinking of not going too far in the outside world, not knowing what the situation is out there regarding this pandemic. So the airline business, I think, and the holiday business on the whole is going to really suffer quite a bit, going to take a hit. In fact, I heard that, who was it, Warren Buffett, he has sort of unloaded all his airline stock. And being a smart cookie that he is, he knows that, you know, this business is not going to fare well in the future. And unless they come out with fuel and the space that is going to be useful. But in that sense, one of the things that I don't know whether I mentioned it when we were talking about reusable rockets, you know, in that SpaceX program that they have, amongst other things which they're doing, they also have plans of making a journey to any part of the world in half an hour. And since they're going to be using fuel which is not going to be as pollutant, I don't think, and yet because of the time taken is so short, the fact that you can get across the world for cheaper may be also in the pipeline. So that's an interesting sort of development that could happen in the future. So let's see. Yeah, well, I saw all those pizza being delivered, but I think a lot of people who have gardens, they're going to be growing a lot of stuff, you know, themselves in their gardens. Yeah, George, are you waving for something?
Yeah. How would that affect the atoms in the body if you can go from one place to another in half an hour?
Well, the fact that we are going to be, you know, the astronauts are normally trained for this, especially for the high G levels that they will experience at high acceleration. But here, I think it's going to be a question of going up like that, not too high, and then sort of going across and coming down. So
Are you talking about a vortex of energy?
The G level, the gravitational sort of impact is going to be not as big as what the astronauts will encounter. So our speeds, although they are going to be taking us around in half an hour, yet they are not of that sort of, you know, acceleration. Acceleration is the one, it's not the speed that really matters too much. It's the acceleration, which means when you take off from zero to whatever, you know, things that you go to, that period gives you maximum type of, if you like, stress on the body. But once you overcome that, the rest of the journey is going to be at a speed which is high, but you don't feel the acceleration. So it's a matter of seeing how they are going to help us get over that acceleration issue. Now, coming back to this food miles, this is one of the issues that we have food. You know, there's, you know, mangoes coming all the way from South America, and, you know, miles and miles of food miles. I wonder if we are going to be supporting such foods in the future. I've stopped eating a lot of mangoes simply because they come from so far, but yet I buy myself an occasional one just to know that I don't forget the taste of a mango. So I think, and then you got these beautiful flowers. You know, I was in Kenya once and I saw these huge farms, sun houses and so on, which produce these wonderful flowers. And they plug them and they ship them, you know, to Europe. And that also is expensive business, costly in terms of fuel and so on. But then, you know, so all those types of things, I think, are going to disappear. And that depends on how quickly the oil will, how the oil will still remain at this low level. because, you know, as far as coronavirus is concerned, I don't think there's a 2-meter separation required for cargo. So they're going to put a lot of cargo on these planes and ferry them, I think. You know, that's one of the things that I see happening. Because they can't, you know, pack people.
Global warming. With global warming, we can grow them ourselves.
Yeah, there are various ways that we can, you know, grow vegetation, you know, in a vertical sort of plane. I've seen some farms, some experiments being done in Italy, where they grow fantastic amount of salads in a vertical sort of sheet or plane, and it takes very little, you know, water, and you have to get a very fresh product coming out, and that's going to be the way, I think, forward. So I wouldn't be surprised that that change will come about as far as the salads are concerned and so on. Yeah, lockdown activities. I suppose a few people are probably learning bridge, and some others are probably playing solitaire, and some, yeah, this fellow is playing rummy, I think. Or is it, no, I think it's bridge probably. So whatever, card games are always very nice. And I think people should sort of engage in it, especially if it's a family. It's a game that family can play together. Yeah, well, this is an issue at the moment which are facing, you know, about opening schools and so on, because that subject of education is a very complex one, as it says over here. High impact profession needs known to man. And of course, you know, we need to also compensate these teachers at the right levels in the same way that we are thinking about trying to compensate for the nurses in a better way, and the care sort of you know, the care home people. So we need to recognize, I think, for the services that people do, which are essential, which we are now realizing are very essential, and those who get paid very high professions for just sort of gambling on public funds, which a lot of, you know, banks do by taking, you know, positions on stocks and whatnot, and making huge amounts of money. They're taking no risk, using our money and making tons of profit. That sort of game has got to end, I think. Yeah, these are the people, researchers, doctors. We need to, of course, come together to find vaccines. And this is not the only virus, maybe there might be more in the future. So we need to have some way that we get together and be able to solve this type of issue. Let's see if anybody takes the leadership on that. Already WHO is coming under so much trouble from Trump. And Trump, of course, is no friend of any multilateral organization or international organization. So I think we need to wait for him to go. Whereas Biden, if he does come, I think at least he's got some sensible policies that one can look forward to him bringing in if he gets elected. Okay, what is the green policies here of Europe? Now, this is a summary of what they're talking about. I want to bring about the EU climate neutral by 2050. But in order to get there, we need to have higher targets for the 2030 emissions and the energy questions. At the same time, we need to keep the industry working. We don't want the industry to suffer and the job losses to be maintained in any way. So they need to be thinking about creating lots and lots of jobs, which are green jobs. And of course, they want to decarbonize the transport and heating and the industry aspects of it. Because as I said earlier on, energy is the basis of all that we are living with. And we need to think about it. And of course, this is a very nice site for sore eyes. Invest 1 trillion euros. I think it's close to £1 trillion. Or euro is close there now. Which is quite a substantial sum to try and push the whole all the policies towards in the right direction. Yeah, okay, this is the start of that is just a synopsis, 2030 goals for climate and energy. I thought I'd see that. It's going to impact the jobs. It's the same old thing that we've been talking and repeating, but I just thought I might bring that up. Everybody's worried about the future. And I think as we come out of it, this is a big question. Of course, in the process of giving more jobs, we need to look at these sort of issues. Okay, climate change, about the future, yeah. Because the routes, it's the same thing. I'm just repeating myself over here. So we need to set targets. This is where the governments have to come together. It's the governments that makes for big policy changes, because none of these, energy companies or big corporate world will change if there is no regulation of a sort or some incentive to push them towards that goal. They are, as usual, focused on the bottom line, and they want to give money to their shareholders. So that is their concern. So we need to have targets. Okay, one of the targets is this 40% reduction in emissions, greenhouse gases. See, because that's warming up the earth. So they have this target of 40% compared to the 1990 levels, which I think will take us to 2030 sort of target of 80% reduction by 2050. So if we are able to sort of go along with these type of targets, we'll get somewhere. But if we don't have any policy, but just a policy to get people back into jobs, then we are going to be suffering, I think, for a long time. Well, this is the type of change that has been brought about. Despite the fact that the 18% reduction in emission greenhouse gases has taken place over these 20 years, yet the GDP has gone up, which means that one can grow the economy without having to really create extra emissions. So the two are not in conflict unless the specific lobbies are there, who are the ones, who want to go into the dirty industries and so on. So there is a way of green energy outlook, and the prosperity can come about and jobs can come about. So these are the areas that are all going to be impacted. That's the transport here, the road transport, the renewable energy, the utilities that we, the electricity, the energy we use at home. So individually we can see what they are, where we are. Yeah, that's the same chart, in fact, with color. Okay, here we're putting in some solar panels here in various houses. And we saw that in the Tesla sort of lecture that I sort of remember. I think I showed you how a new house was built in USA by Tesla, which had these power walls and batteries which caught the electricity from the roof and then saved it in the batteries, and the excess was supplied to the grid, which is a fantastically good sort of idea. And when the grid, when you need power from the grid, then you can get it back as well. So it's a win-win for both the grid suppliers and the homeowners. Yeah, we need to be looking at energy saving bulbs and anything that conserves energy at the home. I think this has been mentioned to us, and I think the new energy bulbs have come in, which are 90% better than the old ones. And I think all my bulbs have changed over. I think that makes a big difference. And there are other things that one can do at home. Renewable energy, yeah, that's fine. Now the job creation, see, from 3 million in 2002 to 4.2 in 2011. So this is because of the green energy jobs that have been created. So industries and jobs can be created. It's a clear sort of message there. And the fossil fuel reduction takes place. So we're all happy if that happens, because the enormous bills that one pays for fossil fuel are highlighted in the next one, which is this one. I think Europe pays something like 1 billion euros, I think, every day for these bills, all over Europe. So these fossil fuel bills are killing, and not only killing the pocket, but also the climate. This is the budget, and 20% of the budget of the EU now is concerned with climate action, which I think is a substantive part of the budget. And I think it's the right way forward. And that amounts to 180 billion euros, closer to 180 billion pounds as well, I think. So, message here is, two happy faces here, says good business for everybody. So if we go that way, and I'm sure you're all sort of backing that idea. Business, yeah. So here we are, that's global means business and good business. This is where the decisions are going to be taken in the EU, in the EU Parliament. And once they make regulation, it's going to impact all of Europe, which means 27 countries or 26 countries now. Which, and this lady, she's the president of the Commission. You know, the way that the Europe is structured, that they have a European Parliament where, people get elected from proportional representation, as it were, by each country. And then you've got this commission, which is like the executive. It's like our government, the executive. They propose the legislation that needs to be passed by the European Parliament. So here she is, making the right type of, laws. To make Europe climate neutral by 2050, as you said before. Farage used to be there. I don't know. I think he used to be very, very sort of difficult. Okay, all that legislation is going to be enshrined in law. Because unless it's going to be part of law, I don't think the corporate world is going to follow it. So it is essential that those laws are passed. I don't know whether our government is going to be coming out with a green policy wholesale and have laws enacted. So we'll have to wait for that. So here saying that whoever is running the EU between now and 2050, so they all have to follow this law, which means that they can't sort of deviate because that has been passed by Parliament. And that's their agreement on greenhouse gas emissions reduction. Because, greenhouse gases cause warming and all that, there's target there for that as well. 40% reduction to the 90 levels. From there, so they're increasing. They want the 1990 levels to be the gas emission reduction about 50%. So that's going to make a difference to our world. And so we have a cleaner energy, no pollution there. Yeah. Okay, so those are the, okay, the other thing is about the industry. It's nice to be able to talk about the green energy and so on, but industry is the one that is going to push for making itself, sustainable in some way. And the governments have got to be able to listen to their concerns and meet the requirement in some way. And the way that they're thinking of is that as far as Europe is concerned, those countries which are outside of Europe who are not following those strict standards they don't want such people to come in and sell their goods in this market, taking advantage of their own countries not having sufficiently rigorous laws. So in which case the EU will put taxation on such countries' goods coming in. which is, I think, is a good idea. So here's the carbon tax, border tax. So imports coming in from countries which are not pulling their weight are going to be penalized. So carbon border adjustment tax, yeah, that's the same thing. Carbon border adjustment tax on imports for less ambitious. Yeah, these are the, the countries which, for whatever reason, they're not following good practices. Yeah, so here we are. We need to decarbonize, again, the same message. Electricity, not only the energy, but the transport and the heat industries. This is again repeating the same message. Transport needs to be impacted. So we are doing something in terms of HS2. Although HS2 is an expensive proposition, I think by the time it finishes, it will be about 100, 200 billion. But the Chinese want to invest in that to try and give them at least because they've got a good technology which they can deliver on very quickly and at reasonable costs. So transport, rail transport is very energy efficient. No carbon emissions to the same extent because it's much better. So transport is going to be impacted a lot with a good infrastructure, like HS2, for instance. Heating at home, the energy that suppliers will have to be told to sort of go after clean energy and deliver to homes. And industry, all that power needs to be brought in from renewable sources sooner or later. Right. This is again saying the same thing, how to electrify and decarbonize transport, heating, and industry. Yeah, one thing that we're trying to do wants a lot more offshore and onshore wind farms, which I think is a fantastic idea to connect to the grid and be able to follow. Because, all the space here, first of all, I don't think it's an eyesore either if you put it out in the sea. There's plenty of wind there, and you can get the energy that you need from these, natural forces. These are the land sort of wind farms. And then, of course, they're going to make sure that the connection to these are going to happen to the current, grid connections. And they're going to, invest in maritime grid connection as well. Otherwise, we're going to be facing this type of issue of global disaster, melting of ice and glaciers, lots of downpour, flooding in some places where it doesn't need, drought in other places. So if we don't follow, we've got the negative things that we will have to pay for in any case if we don't invest wisely beforehand. So it's a straightforward type of issue. And here we've got all these countries coming together to follow that policy. But we are not there. You can't see the UK flag there. We're out of Europe. And this magical figure, 1 trillion. I'd like to see if the government comes up and matches at least 10% of that. That'll be good. And there's the summary again. Same thing. Okay, we don't know where we are. I think this will be a subject for one of the future lectures as to what are green policies in UK. So until then, we'll just leave it at that. Okay, it's time for our questions here. Yeah, I think we have gone over our time anyway. So until we get blocked, I suppose we can continue. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention plastics in the sea. Apparently, if we don't stop throwing plastics into the oceans by 2050, a third of the ocean is going to be full of plastic.
Yep, you're absolutely right. There's a whole sort of as big an island as UK, I think, in South America, near the Antarctica, which is all plastic. Mm-hmm. And then the microplastic goes down and the fish eat it, and the fish then sort of gives it to us, and our bodies, can't absorb that, but they go into our bodies as well. It's a huge problem. Again, part and parcel of the green industries that we need to come with as for the future. It's related to, I think, again, utilization of energy. These fossil fuels are the ones that create a lot of byproducts for plastics. And if that industry starts to sort of find replacements or substitutes, that would be an answer. In that count, I must say there is a lot of work going on. My niece in Canada, she is into this renewable plastics. It's some sort of a thing that they get out of plants, which can be used as decomposable plastic. So there are lots of ideas like that that are coming through. We'll have to see if the major companies are going to, go that way soon. Yeah.
That was very interesting. Thank you, Shafiq. It kind of, I get the impression that there's a sort of, quite a groundswell of public opinion which is in favour of this. They see the opportunity. We lost the opportunity, or missed the opportunity in 2008 after the financial crash to do any significant structural realignment. I think we've got another opportunity. Unfortunately, it's taken this terrible crisis, pandemic to create it. I suppose and I think there are a lot of businesses and people who are looking very positively about this. My great concern is the mindset of the government we have, unfortunately. We're going to go, well, Brexit's happened, we're going to be desperate to do a trade deal with the States. I mean, Biden may get in, later on, hopefully. But, we're going to be driven into the arms of a country which basically wants to tear up as much environmental and consumer protection legislation as it can. It's pumping huge subsidies into fossil fuels, into the airline industry, into the meat industry in the States. And I don't think our government has got the courage or the conviction to actually follow along the route that a lot of the EU are doing. And that is what worries me. I think we're going to, it's a great opportunity for us to rebuild the economy, and I think and actually grow, genuinely build an economy on a green revival. But I have a horrible feeling, just like the way the government behaved in this pandemic, we're going to be behind the curve yet again. And we'll arrive at the conclusions too late and we'll lose competitive advantage. And that's my big fear. And I suppose the only thing I think we can do is for all of us just to sort of keep pressuring our MPs and to sign petitions and do whatever we can to try and, show the government that actually public, by George, that, the public genuinely, want them to give serious consideration to following a proper green agenda.
You see, you're absolutely right to be concerned about this, because what I had heard during the time of the Brexit debate was the government's inclination to make London into a Singapore on Thames. That type of thinking is worrisome, because it means that you're trying to, do the bad bits of good governance through means which are not popular, in good government. To try and, like right now, if you look at the city, the sort of that we have in terms of what do you call it, black money. They have the biggest expertise in the world as to how to use that black money, and it gets sent off to Panama, to the Guernsey, to the Cayman Islands, to wherever. And when these Panama Papers came out, you remember, millions of these documents were published, and there were several names of people all over the world who had accounts, and a lot of them went through London. And one particular family which I follow, of course, is the Pakistan family, the ruling class there, the Sharif family, their names were very prominent in there. Not only they have, dozens of properties here in UK, all, basically stolen money, trying to launder it one way or another, keeping it in Panama. So that sort of expertise, if we are going to sort of try and profit from that, I think it's rather sort of depressing. We need to be able to find industries like, good high-tech industries, which will be able to deliver. And I think there is a capacity to do that. Right now, we're in the clutches of those moneyed people who use the financial services to their advantage for doing this sort of rather, black money handling and so on. So we shouldn't fall into that league of nasty countries which profit from the weaknesses of other countries in that way. We need to be speaking that out to anybody who wants to listen, at least in government. Yeah. Any others? Okay, we seem to have exhausted. Anything from you, Nimi?
Well, no, just following on from what Doug said, the thing that concerns me now is that because we are leaving the EU without doing deals or anything like that, we're going to be so beholden to the US that we will fall prey to anything they push down our throats. And, Boris is sort of copying Trump, which is the worst thing he could do. But I think economically, because we will have so much to catch up with, and if, Trump was very keen that the UK leaves the EU, but that's not for our benefit, it's actually for his benefit. And I think we will all come to regret that, particularly if he wins again in November. So we can just keep our fingers crossed that he doesn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the mood of the country needs to be understood, I suppose, as to where, as far as USA is concerned, that's another topic, of course, but I think with 40 million nearly people unemployed, it's going to have an anti-Trump impact, certainly, so we'll see. And Biden seems to be coming up with a lot of green policies and infrastructure plans, which wasn't the case before with the Democrats. So their message is becoming a bit more clearer. But in UK, now that we've got a government which has a big majority, we just have to be able to see whether the circumstances are going to be such that they will do the sensible thing. They did the sensible thing when the virus came about by giving out these furloughs and things like that and trying to save industry. We don't know how long that was going to carry on for, but that was a good decision. Because if they hadn't done that, it would have been quite a disaster. Not only would we have lost industries of all sorts, but jobs would have been lost, and there would be a lot of deprivation in the country. So that was a good action. So let's hope that they will come to their senses and not necessarily, be swayed by the greed of the big corporate world or the
I think it's going to take a lot of pressure from opposition parties and from the public to get them to change their mind, Shafiq. I mean, to my mind, and maybe I'm being ultra cynical, I don't think the government has changed its mindset during this COVID crisis. It's got the same mindset that it had about Brexit. This has been, for many, I think, in the government, an inconvenient interruption on the road. They had to throw the money at it. It would be totally unacceptable not to. But it goes against a lot of their basic instincts. And unfortunately, I think also for a green recovery, the government cannot lead it. It can only facilitate it. And that means that what they've got to do is put the resources, but also the decision-making, away from government into much more centralized, to create environments where you know, communities, local authorities, entrepreneurs, businesses can actually, you know, grow the economy. And this government has got such a centralized attitude, and we've seen this through the handling of the COVID crisis and what disasters that has caused. You know, I think there are some really fundamental mindset issues that we have to, that this government's got to get over. And I can't see it changing without a huge amount of pressure being brought to bear from, I think public pressure and the opposition. And I think if we don't put the pressure on, unfortunately, I think this government will lead us down the wrong route, as Mimi was saying, you know, into deals with Trump, and they'll justify it, it'll spin it. It'll justify it. This is what, you know, what it had to do for the good of the country to justify economic activity. It'll play to the Midlands and the North, the red wall areas, and say, well, look what we've done to try and restructure, rebuild your economy. But it's, you know, the reality is this is just going to be spin. So I personally feel that, you know, we need to be very, very vigilant over the next couple of years, particularly in terms of what this government does in terms of recovery strategy.
And I also think that because we've had COVID and we seem to be hurtling down towards a no-deal Brexit departure thing, that they will hide behind the cloak of COVID and they'll blame everything that goes wrong with the economy on that rather than on a no-deal Brexit. And you know, they don't answer to anything because they've been on whatever it is, the thing, it's all anti-EU. So even the things that are really beneficial in the EU Green Deal, as you mentioned it, they almost seem to be proud to sort of separate themselves from it. You know, even this thing with France, no, French people can't come to the UK. Well, you know, we've done pretty badly ourselves in the pandemic, so we can't pretend that we were so good that we can't risk anyone coming in when we've let 20 million people fly into the country since the whole thing started. So it's a joke. And then when you have the government and the prime minister so dependent on this, you know, Cummings, who is a disruptor, and you know, I haven't seen him do anything good. All I've seen him do is win. He decided he was going to win, and he did. And is that what we have to thank him for? I don't know if he's done anything else really positive that makes him so indispensable.
No, I agree.
You know, both you and Doug are, of course, very right in sort of having some big sort of doubts on issues there. But one thing that I still am not ruling out is this Cumming fellow being a total and utter failure for the UK. I think because he doesn't follow the rules, he is going to be taking decisions which are going to be different to what the standard sort of decision makers in the Tory party itself will be seeking out to make. He will disrupt them, I think, because he doesn't look kindly on even the establishment. He wants to knock out the civil service to a large extent. And he wants also to not listen to some of the grandees in the Conservative Party. And he has some sort of little independent mind. So I'm not completely ruling out of him as a total negative guy in Downing Street.
But have we seen him do anything exceptional? Because I don't think we have. And I think the fact that, you know, even this thing that with his behavior, I know, you know, even when the Labour Party talks about having an inquiry, because he's had it in for the civil service, that actually even getting an inquiry going now is very difficult because he's answerable to the minister, which is the prime minister. And so everything is kind of falling apart. And I think he's reckless. You know, if he had a history of successes, that would be different. And then, as you say, you know, he's quite brave and he would do things which might be right. But so far, I haven't seen anything. So
yeah, he doesn't have a record that appeals to me because he succeeded in getting Brexit done.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, precisely.
So there is some success from his sort of point of view. But the tactics that he uses, I think, are pretty unconventional. And therefore, I think we need to shake the establishment a little, and he might be the right guy to do it, perhaps. You know, I'm not.
Well,
I don't know. I mean, as you say, he's a disruptor, Shafiq, and I think you know, disruptors don't are very, are not interested in the steps that you necessarily take. They're very good at throwing a whole pack of cards up in the air and then let someone else pick them all up and make sense of it. I think that's the problem. Actually, I've got just a hypothesis that actually, because Johnson's failure to back him, I think, has now angered so many Tory backbenchers. I have a feeling that actually this may be the start of the end for Johnson. I suspect that in a few months' time, what we will see is Michael Gove will make a coup, make a move. I think Johnson has pissed off quite a lot of his backbenchers. There will be inquiries as to his, abysmal handling of the pandemic. I can see that basically Gove will make a play to get rid of Johnson. Now, having said that, I think Gove is an equally dangerous, probably even more,
I think he's
more dangerous man than Johnson.
That's right.
But I think that's what will happen, actually. The only cancellation I can see for that is Johnson's got this, and I don't understand why people love it. He's got this sort of buffoonery that people seem to love and go, oh, he's a card, isn't he? We don't know how many children he's got, but it doesn't matter. Gove hasn't got that charismatic side, and I think Gove will have difficulty actually appealing to a lot of the electorate going forward. But I don't know. I mean, by then the damage could be done by then anyway.
No, but I think Boris has done his sort of clowning and appealing to everyone, and because he got Cummings with him, and they fooled the entire country into saying, yeah, we have to leave the EU they told us lots of lies and everyone believed it. But now as we see Boris doing things and not doing anything well as far as I can see, and you see him at PMQs and he's completely out of his depth when he's facing a QC, a lawyer who knows what he's talking about. Absolutely. And you think, well, you're not even bright, you're just a clown. And look what happened to the clown in the Ukraine who was elected, the comedian. So I don't see him any different to that guy, I think. Well,
no, I think you're right, actually. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? Because we'll probably have to close the session soon.
Oh.
Any last comments, anybody? Pam, or is it Giselle?
No, I want to see what's happening on TV because
yes, he's talking about it. Yeah.
Okay, in which case shall I close the meeting then?
Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing I was going to say, Shafiq, in conclusion, just going back on where we started with the Hay thing, I just looked it up while you were talking. Yeah. It's Peter Lacey being interviewed by Rosie Boycott.
Oh, right.
And that was it was Sunday, so you should still be able to catch it, I think.
Yeah.
It was about it was relevant to what you were saying, Shafiq, because it was about the circular economy and about recycling and repurposing and, playing to environmental sustainability.
Who's interviewing whom? Sorry.
It was Peter Lacey, who's a partner at Accenture, who's written several books about what he calls the circular economy, being interviewed by Rosie Boycott.
Okay. I'll look into that. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining in. And
thank you.
Thank you.
Next week, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.